If you've been here before, you know that I love to use my craft supplies in different ways to get new looks, especially when that new method is super easy. Hi, I'm Ardith, and today I'm going to show you 2 ways you can turn your stencil to get a different look. One method uses just the stencil and your brain, and the other method uses a new tool that's recently come on the market. Both methods give great results, so let's get started with the low-tech option. I'm starting with the Petal stencil from Birch Design, and I've taped it down to a 6-inch square of white cardstock. I want to create a rainbow flower, so I've got 8 colors of Catherine Pooler minis out, and I'm going to mask each petal so I don't contaminate the colors. I start with yellow, and I'm using blending brushes. You can use whatever you have, but I find that the bristles stand up to stenciling way better than the foam blending tools, and you may have to replace the foams when they get ripped up a bit by going over the stencil edges. Since the stencil has 4 petals, I skip over colors so that I go from yellow to coral to purple to aqua. Once I turn the stencil, I'll be able to fill in the rainbow with those in-between colors. When I turn the stencil, it's easy to get a 45-degree angle by using the lines on my work surface. These 4 petals will be perfectly spaced between the 4 that are already on the paper. I use some 2-inch Post-it tape to both hold the stencil in place and also cover the corners of my panel so I don't get any ink there. Then I mask the petals and blend the other 4 colors into the areas. You could work with a smaller piece of cardstock, including one that's the size of an A2 card if you want. Working with a 6-inch square will give me the full pattern, which allows me to choose the area I want to use on my card, and it also means I'm not blending ink onto my work surface. And there's just something so satisfying about seeing that whole daisy come together. For my card design, I did 3 of the same 6-inch square panel, with the petals in the same order, and now I'm going to cut the 3 layers of the Kinsley die from the centers of them. That way, all 3 of the layers will have all 8 of the colors. Now, Kinsley has a somewhat unique design. If you look closely, you can see that the 8 petals actually have 2 designs. 4 have 1 little design element, and the other 4 have 2 design elements. This is important because when I layer my 3 layers up, I don't want the colors to line up exactly. I want to turn each layer so that I get a mix of colors showing, but I need to make sure that the designs line up, if you see what I mean. So that just means I need to take a little extra care when I'm cutting the next 2 layers to be sure that I get the colors lined up with the correct petals. I turn the cardstock and then I lay the die down in the same orientation as the previous layer, and this should result in the look I'm going for. When I put them together, I still have 4 choices of position for turning the 2 layers, but not 8, due to that difference in the petal design, and you can start to see how the colors start to mix because of the turning. So once again, I figure out how the die fits into the color pattern, and then I turn the panel before running the final die through my die cutting machine. When they all come together, you can see a real patchwork of color. I use the Vibrant Blooms die, which are solid but in the same shape as Kinsley, as a backer to add some contrast. I think the mishmash of colors has a very pretty feel and adds a beautiful pop of color to my mostly white card base. I finished this card with the Jumbo Lingo Hello die and made sure to add some extra support under the H so that it'll all be at the same level. Now let's use the same stencil with a more high-tech method for turning. This tool is called Stencils 360, and I'll link to my video above where I show you how it works with its own round stencils. But today, I'm showing how I adapted it to use it with my 6-inch square stencil. One of the paper guides works for a 6-inch square piece of cardstock, and I put that piece of cardstock inside, and then I put the petal stencil into the guide as well. What I found, though, was that the inner edges of the guide were catching on the corners of my cardstock when I turned it. So I put my thinking cap on, and the easiest solution to me seemed to be to just use a bigger piece of cardstock. Then those corners on the guide would always be on the paper and not be able to catch on the corners. The 8-inch square paper fits perfectly within 4 of the guidelines on the Stencil 360 base, but it doesn't even really matter if it's not perfectly centered, since I won't be using the full panel for my card anyway. Next, I put the clear paper guide back in place, and I put the stencil inside. I taped it with 4 pieces of washi tape, and now I'm ready to turn. Now initially, this tool might seem like overkill when I just showed you a perfectly good, low-tech method of turning the stencil. But the beauty of it is that I can turn the stencil easily and accurately to any angle I want because of the guidelines on the base of the tool. This time I'm going for a completely different monochrome look, and I'm going to use 4 colors of blue and aqua inks. And I'll skip the masking and just use 1 color for each turn of the stencil. Now we should talk about stencil choice. One of the things about many of your 6-inch square stencils is that they're not designed to turn. If you turn them and blend ink through them, you're going to end up with overlapping patterns that can very quickly become way too busy. I'm turning the stencil now, and you can see that I'm going to end up with 12 petals on this daisy rather than the 8 that I did on the other card. I'm changing color and again blending ink through all 4 of the petals. Back to stencil choice. This stencil has a center point, which makes it ideal for this technique, and I've been having fun looking through all my stencils to see which ones I think will work well with this tool. I can see there's a slight gap between the stencil and the guide, and I'm getting ink through. This won't be a problem with this design, but in future I might put tape along all the edges just to be sure that I don't end up with the extra ink, since it might limit my choice as far as which area I can use on my card front. Now I could keep going and add even more petals between the ones I've blended. This tool keeps the center of the stencil exactly in the center of the design, and the guide makes it so easy to turn. And of course you can use the shapes on the base to make sure that your angles are precise and the petals are perfectly spaced. To finish this card, I spritzed the panel with Avery Elle Clear Shimmer Spray as well as Neenah Wakely Gloss Spray in white for a frosty, snowy look. I trimmed it down to a 4-inch square, keeping the pattern slightly off-center. My snowflake is the new Frosted Snowflake Layered die set, with the bottom 2 layers cut from white cardstock and the top layer cut from glitter cardstock from the Memory Box Delicate Pastel Glitter Pad. At first glance, these 2 cards may look like they don't have a lot in common, but that just shows you how versatile this technique is, whether you go low-tech and just use your desk, or higher-tech and use the tool. And now, as I said, I'm going to go through my square stencils and see which ones will work with this technique. Stay tuned for next week when I'll be back with a new video that shows lots of ways to use the Stencils 360 tool. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time!